Hello, this is Marcos Patchett, the Nocturnal Herbalist, and today's video is an interview with my fellow herbalist and astrologer Sharon Knight that I conducted quite recently. Sharon was kind enough to allow me to interview her, and I think it's a really interesting interview because Sharon is a professional astrologer and secondly a herbalist as well. She mainly practices astrology and occasionally recommends herbs, and we do talk about that a bit, but really this interview is about how Sharon used astrology in a very practical way to help her through a very difficult medical experience. So a quick disclaimer before I get into the video. I do have to say that this video, while it is hopefully going to be useful to many people, it should be regarded as for entertainment purposes mainly, simply because both Sharon and I are qualified both in astrology and in the use of medicinal herbs. So while we do talk about the use of medicinal herbs in quite a serious medical situation, specifically a cancer diagnosis that Sharon had at the time, do not use any of these herbal remedies we discuss without any professional advice. If you have a medical diagnosis, particularly a cancer diagnosis, please do seek out proper professional advice and supervision. Likewise, please don't take any drastic decisions about your treatment without discussing them with fully qualified professionals beforehand. That said, I do think this is a really interesting interview, and in particular because of the way that Sharon utilized the astrology as a guide, as a framework, both in terms of setting an intention for herself and in terms of building visualizations around it, so that even if you approach it from an entirely skeptical angle, even if you think astrology is a load of old rubbish, its value in this scenario was one of actively enhancing, at the very least, actively enhancing the placebo response, maximizing what Professor Daniel Merman, who's written a brilliant book called Meaning, Medicine and the Placebo Response that I often talk about because it's fantastic, it's maximizing what he argues should be renamed the meaning effect, not the placebo effect. Placebo has become a kind of dirty word for a very large rabbit hole that incorporates the whole power of the mind to affect the body's responses and our perceptions of reality and all the rest of it. So at the very least, some of the things we talk about in this video really show how a system like astrology, a conceptual, symbolic system like astrology, can be used in a very practical way to enhance potentially medical outcomes. Obviously, as an astrologer, both Sharon and I believe that it has greater value than that. It has some predictive value as well, but its principal therapeutic utility, and this is a very good example of that, is to facilitate better therapeutic outcomes. Anyway, enough preamble from me. Just wanted to say those two things. Firstly, that this is a really great example of how astrology can practically be used in medical situations, and two, that you need to use discretion. Don't just take any of the herbs we mention in this video. Don't use astrology or herbs or any of the techniques we talk about in this video without getting professional advice, and please don't just cut off your doctor or your oncology team or whatever. Anyway, that being said, enjoy the video. This is Sharon Knight. I'm just talking with Sharon Knight today. She's the chair of the Association of Professional Astrologers International, and she was the 2016 International Astrologer of the Year, which is not a small accolade. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. She's also a very eminent and very good traditional astrologer, one of the early vanguard of traditional astrology in Europe and in the UK, and has been a stalwart at it. And also, you've been very, very kind to me over the last few years, Sharon, which I really appreciate. So thank you for agreeing to talk to me today. And I wondered if you wanted to say a few words about yourself to start with. Just, I mean, that's my overview of you, but I wondered if you wanted to introduce yourself a little bit first as well.
Well, yes, Marcus has just said I'm a traditional astrologer, which means I only use the 7 naked eye planets, although I grew up with modern psychological astrology, because back in the 80s, that's all there was. So I've been a practicing astrologer for nearly 30 years. I first qualified with the QHP, I think it was in 1990, 1991. I then studied with the late, great, amazing Rob Zoller in the mid-90s, just after Project Hindsight started up. And I was extremely fortunate to have had his help to understand Valens, Dorotheus and Bonatti. So my astrology that I practice is a blend of Hellenistic, Persian, very definitely Persian, and medieval up to Renaissance with William Lilly. I did an got my MA in 2004 at Bath Spa, where my thesis was on the use of astrology in medicine in the 16th and 17th centuries. And then after that, I did a herbal course, but obviously not medically qualified, because you know how expensive that course is and how long that course is.
Oh yeah. But you do, it is I checked up on that. It's a diploma in phytotherapy. It's not a weekend internet qualification. It's a proper course in medicinal herb use. It's just not the massive, ridiculously expensive one, but it's you're properly qualified in that as well. So yeah.
Yes, but I don't, obviously I don't class myself as a herbalist, because I feel without having undergone clinical observations with real people, you can't call yourself a herbalist.
Okay, no, fair enough. No, but you do have an above average and actually qualified and studied level of herb lore in your head,
Yes.
and a good working knowledge of herbal pharmacy and principles of prescribing, which is really useful, and obviously very much that for my small subscribership, very much their bag, I hope. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I'm such a sad person that 20 odd years ago, after my husband died, I was looking to move, and I was going to move to the West Country, but then a house came up in the village of Isfield, which is where Nicholas Culpeper grew up.
Right, brilliant.
So I bought the house in Isfield purely and simply because of the Culpeper connection.
That's amazing. I love it.
And I like to dream that he actually did visit the house, because it was built in the late 1500s, the early part of it.
Obviously not implausible. I mean, we know how busy he was. He was an incredibly busy practitioner, so extremely likely, but brilliant. Okay,
yes,
I didn't know that. Great.
Yeah, the house where he grew up was literally just over the fields from where I live. So it is possible.
Very close.
Because it was, I suppose, quite a large house for that time.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Sharon. That's a really good intro. And just for any non-astrological, because I mean, some people coming to my channel will be astrologers, and some people will be herbalists, and some people won't be either. So for anyone non-astrologers, a lot of the stuff Sharon was talking about there was just famous old astrology names and traditions, essentially. So Robert Zoller was one of the astrologers who really repopularized and went into a great deal of technical detail about the use of traditional astrology. He sort of written about medieval techniques and reclaimed and rediscovered them. Anyway, I won't go on about that too much, but because you can look up those names if you want to, and I suggest you do if you don't know who they are. Anyway, right. Okay, what I really wanted to talk to you today about, Sharon, was you have personal experience with using medical astrology. And I think this would be really, really interesting for a lot of my viewership, I hope. So can you tell us a little bit about that situation and what transpired?
Okay, that situation that Marcus is referring to is in 2010, I was first diagnosed with breast cancer. It was low grade, and I ended up having a mastectomy in January 2011. And they thought that was that. And that was an estrogen-based cancer.
So it was estrogen receptor positive. So estrogen positive or negative?
I can't remember, because the next lot of breast cancer I got was Herceptin receptive. So it was a completely different type of breast
Okay.
cancer, or the the other type of breast cancer, I should say.
Switched. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so that was that, and I was going along quite happily. I wasn't too bothered by having a mastectomy because life is better than one tit. Um, and then I discovered I couldn't lift my left arm easily, and after about 6 months, I was quite concerned. So I went back, and the doctor who examined me said he thinks he'd just do a needle biopsy. And I've got enough knowledge, of course, to know you don't just think you're going to do a needle biopsy and waste NHS funds.
Looking for something, sure, yes.
So I went home and I ordered a juicer there and then.
All right.
And then, of course, I was called back and told I had 4 to 6 months to live, possibly up to a year with treatment. I have that letter in black and white.
Wow.
And
So,
I was, yeah.
Just a medical question so had they given, because what they do with cancer is normally they stage it and they grade it. And just for non-medical viewers, the stage is usually 1, 2, 3. If it's 1, it's sort of local. If it's 2, it's just spread into the lymph. And if it's 3, it's going other places. And I think the grade is 1 to 4. And that depends on how naughty the cancer cells are. Can you remember what stage and grade it was, Sharon?
Metastatic grade 4. It appeared in my spine in one
Stage
vertebra.
3, grade 4, the most serious you can get, basically.
Yeah.
It's spread everywhere and it's behaving very badly.
Yes. And that was the other thing. I knew there was something badly wrong because my back went. And previously, I've always been a very strong physical person. I've ridden horses all my life, lugged bales of hay. So I've got a very strong physical, muscular body. And the fact that my back just suddenly went, I knew that there was an issue. Yeah, so it was a spot on my liver. They thought a spot on my left ovary, and obviously in a vertebrae in my spine. So that was that. So they said they could offer me chemo,
Right.
as palliative care.
Only. Okay, I didn't realize it was quite so hardcore when you got the diagnosis. That's really intense. So was the chemo just Herceptin? And so you said the second one was Herceptin. What can you remember, just for, again, this is mainly my technical, nerdy medical side thinking, can you remember what chemo they offered?
Hold on. Sorry, I meant to have this file out.
All right.
I think it was the D. It's the one that makes your hair fall out, your nails fall out. But it was 2.
Okay.
Just trying to see if I can find it. So anyway, I saw a new oncologist, and I said to him they had the wrong diagnosis, i.e., not with cancer, but with the terminal diagnosis.
Okay.
Because being an astrologer, I knew that come the December of that year, so this was the March, and I knew in December, if I could keep going, on the 5th of December, which happened to be my dad's birthday, okay, here's the astrology bit. My solar arc, Mars, which is the ruler of my sun, and the sun is the light of life, moved into Aries. Now, it was very slow. It was on 29 degrees Pisces.
Okay.
For almost a couple of years. 29 degrees Pisces has a fixed star known as Shiat,
which is what it sounds like, really. Shiat.
4 letters, begins with S and T.
Yes.
And I thought, once my Mars can get into Aries,
It's nice and strong. It's in its own domicile, and it's moved off of Shiat. Got it. That's interesting that you used solar arc, Sharon, because that's a solar arc is quite a modern technique, isn't it?
Well, there's similar techniques in the tradition,
Right.
but when you're faced with something like that, you can either say, "Oh my God, I'm going to die,"
Yeah. Or adopt a more constructive approach of looking at all of the. Did you already have that in mind, Sharon, when you went to, or was this something that you spotted later?
it was immediately after I was told I was terminal.
Right.
So
Really
I,
interesting.
I then, you see, I'm not interested in me. I don't look at my own astrology.
No, sure.
So it was quite a revelation actually to actually look at my own chart and look at it. One of the difficulties, as you know, Marcus, is taking yourself, your preconceptions and your hopes out of the chart
Yes,
and just
definitely.
reading the chart cold. So that's what I had to do. And I think knowing that I had a target, I had 9 months.
Mm.
Um, and so I told the consultant, I said, I will do the chemo. Well, that was partly pressure from my mum and sister to do the chemo.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I
Yeah.
understand that from speaking to many clients over the years that, family all obviously all have their own, intent.
It,
Sharon, send me that info later because I'll
yes, I
I'll
will.
pop it on the screen
I
or
can't
something. Yeah,
find
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Fine,
yeah,
fine.
yeah. But so what happened? Once I got my juicer, I then looked into juicing. Now, I'd been very fortunate because I'd looked after a gentleman who was in his 90s, and he was a supporter of Dr. Rosie Daniels, who had been at the Bristol Cancer
Okay,
Institute, the alternative cancer, and he and his chums sponsored funding for newly qualified doctors or GPs to study holistic medicine.
mm.
He was 94. He then developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and
Sadly passed
leukemia.
away.
Yeah,
Okay.
but because I had access to all his papers, and he and I used to discuss medical and herbs because he was a very keen gardener,
Right.
and I had looked into juicing for him. So I knew that juicing could really turn things around. And I said to him, I said, look, I found out about juicing. We can do this. And he said, Sharon, he said, I'm 94. He said, I like my meat and 3 veg 3 times a day.
Well, fair enough. I mean,
He said,
choice.
I haven't got much longer anyway, and I want to enjoy it.
Fair,
So,
fair play. Yeah.
fair comment. So again, I was fortunate that I had this knowledge very fresh in my head
Sure.
with the juicing. And so I had to do the MRI, the one where they inject you with radioactive dye and you can't go near children. Is that MRI or the PET? Oh, I
I
can't.
can't, I can't, I know which one you mean, the radio label dye, and then they
Yeah,
trace it, see where it's
yeah,
gone. Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's how they knew it was in my spine and my liver and things. But
Okay.
then I started juicing. Now I think it was 10 weeks before I started the chemo.
Okay.
In that 10 weeks of juicing, the cancer disappeared.
Amazing. Okay, I have several questions from that. That's brilliant. So first thing would be, did you follow a sort of specific juicing protocol, like the Gerson therapy or something like that? Was it a package deal, or did you
No,
tailor it?
I tailored it. I tailored it to my body and to as much fresh food that I could get locally.
Okay. So that's brilliant. So when you say you tailored it to your body, how did you was there a was there a juice like selection process? What did you base that on? The selection, yeah.
I would juice up a lot of pepper,
Right.
ginger, garlic. So I
Mars
tried.
stuff.
I
We're
used
going for
Mars.
Mars. Okay, that's where
Yeah.
I was getting at. Were you trying to fortify the bit of the chart that represented you, which is obviously one of the top of Culpeper's rules, is fortify the Lord of the Ascendant, you know? So you I thought that's what you'd be trying to do, but so then I presume I'm going to put this out there, then you tell me if this matches your rationale. So you're fortifying the Lord of the Ascendant with Marsy stuff. And then the secondary sort of the Venn diagram, the other half of the Venn diagram would be these plants or herbs might have some anti-cancer activity. So you're selecting Mars herbs with anti-cancer activity. Would that be a fair?
That is a very fair
Good.
diagnosis, doctor. Yes. So not only did I start the juicing regime, but I also had a herbalist locally
Right.
that I knew through the chap I worked for, and so he came round, and as I started juicing, he gave me a load of herbs. So it was yarrow, Shisandra,
Okay. Yeah.
self heal,
Yeah.
black coash,
Okay.
pellitory of the wall,
Yeah.
celandine,
Interesting.
and then obviously I have milk thistle because I believe in milk thistle for everybody.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very useful for anyone who doesn't know. Milk thistle, Silybum marianum, or Cardius marianus, although Silybum is a much better name because it sounds funny. Silybum is a brilliant liver herb. It protects the liver, and just it's been found to protect the liver against all kinds of hepatotoxins. So it's a very important plant for that. But that's an interesting. I see. So did you classify, I presume, did you leave the herbs up to this guy? You said, okay, you
Yes.
do the herbs because that's
Yeah.
your area, and I'm going to do the juicing. Because the herbs you've kind of, and if I was to planetize them, you've got Venus, Shisandra. I confess I don't know. I think it might be Mercury because it's 5 flavored seed in Chinese medicine. It's
Yeah.
all 5 flavors in one. So I've thought, is it Mercury? Is it Jupiter? Is it Saturn? I think it's Mercury. But anyway, self-heal is Venus, pellitory is Mercury, black cohosh is Saturn, and celandine is the Sun. And you can see what he was trying to do there with the herbs would be black cohosh is the estrogen receptory one, I think. So that must be the Herceptin because it's an estrogen receptor modulator. It contains compounds that modulate that. The celandine contains anti-cancer compounds, and it's good for were there metastases in your liver at the time, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because the celandine is something that you might use if there was that kind of thing going on in the liver. It can also be used for gallbladder problems. And the Shisandra, so he's got 3 liver herbs in there really: the Shisandra, the celandine, and the milk thistle. So how long did you take that herbal combo for? Because you started the juicing pretty much straight away, and then
and bloodroot was the other one. Ghastly
sanguinaria.
stuff.
Now
Oh,
that's your Mars herb. That's fully Mars. I mean, it's bright red and quite toxic
yes.
in high doses and interesting. Okay, so there was a pokey old Mars herb in there.
Oh, that was foul.
Was it all in one mix, Sharon? Were they all combined?
No, the bloodroot and the milk thistle was separate.
Okay, and then the rest was a
The
mix.
rest was a mix. Yeah.
Interesting. So how long between your initial diagnosis of disseminated stage 3 grade 4 cancer and you said it, I think you did say, so clearly not paying enough attention, but you said by the time you were due to start chemo, it was all clear. So how long was that period, would you say, that you were using juices and herbs?
12 weeks.
That's really quick. Fantastic. That's just 3 months. I mean, it wouldn't have felt quick to you then, I'm sure, but that's and what, so tell us a little bit about your routine, if you could. So how were you juicing? When were you juicing? How often? And a bit about, first of all, the medicines, and then any other changes that you made that you're happy to talk about in a public forum.
I'm happy to talk about it all in a public forum because I feel it's important that anyone who has a cancer diagnosis
doesn't shut the door when they hear that you've got a terminal blah blah blah
yeah, it doesn't matter if I've got, well, I've had 7 years now. If I have another 2 or 3 years, I have beaten the
Yes.
diagnosis.
Well, the standard, I mean, first of all, you were given, you've got this many months, and you have that, as you say, in black and white in letter form. But secondly, the standard statistics for cancer survival are usually based on 5 years or less. They're usually 5-year survival. Sometimes they use 2-year survival for the more aggressive cancers. So you've certainly well outlived that original prognosis. So yeah, so tell us a bit about
Yes, right.
your.
So my day would start off. Now, again, just sort of going back, I kept a diary, and I feel it's very, very important to record not only what you're ingesting, but also when you start the chemo, the effects, because then you can plan your life, because you know that day 10 to 12 is the time you can socialize and party. So I kept a diary. So in the morning, I would start off juicing with lemon in water. I'd start, lemon juice
In water. Yeah.
in warm water. I'd drink a pint of that. I would then take some of the herbal mixture, and then I would juice mostly green vegetables, green apples, oranges, lot of lemon, lot of ginger. I did juice a lot of ginger in just about everything. Celery, of course, because that kept the kidneys working. But there is one thing I will tell you, which is absolutely ghastly, but you're going to hear it. After, I don't know, maybe a fortnight of having been on the herbs, Haskell, my herbalist, was bringing me some fresh herbs, and he came up, and I said to him, I said, I really don't feel well. I said, I feel foul. This is before the chemo. I said, I really feel foul. And with that, I said, oh, I think I'm going to be sick.
Right.
Now, I was laying on the settee, and I had a downstairs shower room, which fortunately was tiled floor and ceiling and walls. And I did projectile vomiting. Luckily, most of it I got to the door, and most of it went down the toilet.
Wow.
I have never ever been so ill.
Violently sick. Well, how long after starting taking the herbs was that? Was that a build up gradually,
It
or?
was about 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. And had you been feeling nauseous more and more every day, or was it
No,
sudden?
it was sudden. And then, of course, then the other end went.
Yes, both ends. So what did he do? I'm really interested to see because obviously if I was a prescribing herbalist in that situation, I'd think, oh God, there's it's, you're making the person sick, so you'd want to sort of like say come off the herbs for a couple of days and what happened. How I'm really, because the old school, the medievals, their aim was to make you purge. A lot of the medicines, where they would prepare you, they would give you herbs and preparatives to cook the humours to sort of get your metabolism, and then they would give you a purgative to make you purge. Now, obviously, we have a different, the biomedical understanding of things is quite different. So nowadays, there's a sort of belief that purging is usually bad, but the traditional belief was quite different. So I'm quite interested to see how he reacted and how you reacted and what happened. So
well, he sat there.
Right.
Well, he couldn't do anything else, could he?
Well, during no.
And he said to me, you're purging all the black humor.
Right.
Now, I have a strong belief. I mean, we all have a cancer cell within us, and some of us, I think, genetically programmed that. I'm sorry if this goes against what you might feel, but when we're programmed that some of us will develop cancer under extreme emotional stress.
I think that's actually biologically true, Sharon. In every cell in our bodies, there are oncogenes. They are genes which switch cancer cells on, they switch the function of the cell from normal collaborative cell into cancer cells, like the cells go into survival mode. That is a switch that exists in every cell. And I totally agree. And I think biomedical types would agree that certain people have different liabilities, should we say?
Yeah.
Certainly from a traditional astrology point of view, the idea that certain patterns are inherited and we have certain liabilities would very much fit with that. So, yeah.
You see, basically, I'm a very happy person. My personality is sanguine. No two ways
It
about it.
really is. It
It's
really is
sanguine.
great.
But being a sanguine personality still doesn't take away emotional upset when relationships don't work out. And I'd always wanted children, and I couldn't have them. And I think it was the realization, the culmination of another relationship not working out, and
Right.
knowing that that was it. My chances of ever having children were
Okay.
gone. So I think that was why I got the cancer, because I have a lovely life, had a lovely life, and but it was the deep emotional.
That's this is a really interesting point that you've just brought up there, Sharon. I mean, that's it's a little one of my little truisms that I trot out every so often, that whatever gets pushed down from the top comes out of the sides, you know, which I completely agree with you there, that there are likely to be for most illnesses, and this doesn't preclude there being a physical mechanism, because sometimes you know,
Yeah, of
really
course.
hardline mechanistic materialistic people get really upset when you say things like this and say, no, you know, it's not all woolly. And no, it's not about that. It doesn't preclude there being a physical
Yeah,
mechanism, but I think it's absolutely true to say that emotional upset and particularly things that we cannot process do express themselves physically ultimately. If you really are a physical, like you need a mechanism, then the mechanism is stress. If you look at stress and all the numerous effects stress can have. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way, because yes, so carry on, sorry.
yeah. So I feel facing my demise. I'd already faced, you know, I lost my husband when I was 38, so death has no fear for me. But at the same time, I did not want to die. I had too much astrology to do, too many parties to go to.
Great.
So I do think that the excessive purging, because it was vile. I mean, it was seriously vile. It was black
That's fascinating. Now,
vomit.
I wonder if that was the physically, because as I say, there's always, you can look at these things on many different levels, and one does not preclude the other. The physical thing, that could have been bloodroot, because bloodroot has some cumulative toxicity. It's pretty aggressive. It's a very strong anti-cancer, at least in the lab. I mean, we have to qualify all of this with, you know, the modern scientific thing is a lot of these herbs have traditional use, and they have biomedical that is corroborated with laboratory findings, but for most of them we don't have human double-blind placebo-controlled clinical trials. But I always think, if it looks like a duck and it talks like you know the phrase, if it looks and quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So if it's traditionally used for that thing and its pharmacology says it was useful for that thing, and we have anecdote and empirical information that it is useful for that thing, then yes, it would be lovely to have the double-blind placebo-controlled clinical whatnots. But it's anyway, so it might have been the bloodroot on the physical level, but it's fascinating that it was all black. And but there wasn't even though it was black coming out of both ends. And sorry, graphic people, if any of you are triggered watching this, but you know, whatever, it's this channel, so you know what you're in for. But yeah, if it was black, was there any worry that it was blood, or that there was you know?
No, I was very certain there was no blood, but it was amazing after that purge. Now the next morning I had to be at the Sussex County for 9 o'clock for a meeting with my oncologist, and I
Right.
thought, there is no way I am going to get up in the morning and drive 20 miles, park, and be there for 9 o'clock and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Well, was I ever wrong?
Really?
Because I woke up the next morning. I'm an early morning person. I woke up early. I felt so light of heart. I mean, that was the big thing. I didn't feel ill. I didn't feel trembly. I think the whole experience of literally everything coming out, getting rid of all the suppressed emotion over the years, because people, well, you know how it is, we all have a face that our friends see, and the face is always, well, nothing ever bothers Sharon. And I think it was acknowledging that actually a lot of things bother me, and I ain't standing for no shit no more. And
Right.
and when I so I made my appointment, and I was amazed. And the other thing is that going through the chemo, as you know, your white blood cells don't exist. But my red blood count was always very strong, and they couldn't understand it.
Oh, interesting. Just a question for the timeline, Sharon. So that hardcore terminal diagnosis, began juicing, began herbs. You said a few months later, 7 months later or something. You said, I need to write things down.
No, this was so it was March. I got the diagnosis. April, I started juicing. April. Okay. So this was probably the end of May.
That was end of May, and and this was before you begun the chemo. You had this big old purge, huge clear out, shall we say? And then, when did the chemo actually begin?
The 4th of July.
July 4th of Independence Day for Americans. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And when the chemo, and you said there was a scan before the chemo began, and they found from that scan there was no trace of cancer. It had all gone, or had everything shrunk, or what was the state of play by that point?
The state of play was there didn't appear to be any live cancer cells in my spine. The vertebrae has been eaten.
Spine was clear. Spine was clear of tumors now.
Liver was clear, and ovary was clear.
Okay. But the breast, there was still tumor in the breast, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but a lot of the metastases, which is the spread, where it had spread, that had all dried up and receded and disappeared.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And the breast tumor was the size of a tea bag.
Right. Initially, that's
on the scan.
Right.
And when they did the pre-chemo scan, it was shrunk down to the size of a pea.
Amazing.
So it was still there, but it was the size of a pea.
All right. That's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to get a bit more into the astrology in a minute, but I wanted to get the timeline and the medical regime. So when you started the chemo, was that just a standard sort of like you get it was IV every 2 weeks or something?
Every 2 weeks. Right. And incidentally, for anyone who's watching your channel, if you're going to have chemo, do have a port-a-cath fitted. And that's, what a difference.
In what way?
Oh, having the treatment. You see, when you have the chemo, you will hear many people say they can't get the infusion in the veins because the veins collapse, they dry out. Whereas when you have a port-a-cath, it's straight into the main vein. So your hands and your arms aren't affected.
Okay. So that's great. Yeah.
I mean, it really is different. I mean, to having watched other people go through it who had the IV in the arm or in their hand, the terrible traumas they suffered.
So did a lot of those people get the peripheral neuropathy more and you didn't get it as much, or is it more the trauma to the veins?
Trauma to the veins, and of course then that would hold up their chemo treatment.
Right.
Whereas all that held up my treatment once and only once was I had very bad neuropathy, which sadly has lasted. Yeah, in my feet and my hands.
Does tend to. I don't know if you know this trick, Sharon. You probably do, but do you know about chili oil, capsaicin, capsicum? Okay, brilliant. I thought you would. It's for any viewers out there, Capsicum. They often prescribe this as a
Yes,
capsaicin cream in hospitals now,
yes.
but it's a wonderful Mars treatment. Obviously, as you can make chili oil, you just chop up hot chilies and put them in olive oil or any other oil, really. Leave it on a window ledge for a couple of weeks, strain it, and then you just rub that oil into your hands and feet. And this works if you have. It doesn't. It won't repair the nerves, unfortunately, but it does significantly reduce the pins and needles, the paresthesiae. So you're familiar with that, I could see. All right, great. Thanks, Sharon.
Well, I use it on my knee when I hurt my knee because
Okay.
it obviously it stimulates the blood supply.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. So so my next question was, how did the regime, how did your regime change when you went on to the chemo? Did you change anything with the juicing or with the herbs, or did they carry on straight through? How was that managed?
We carried on straight through with the herbs. I think there was an
Really?
increase in the milk thistle
Okay.
because I remember Haskell used to have to come up quite frequently with large bottles of milk thistle. And I then probably I started to eat vegetables, have some steamed vegetables. And that was after I'd started the chemo. So basically, for 3 or 4 months, I just juiced. And yes, and then I would eat green vegetables, green leafy vegetables.
Right.
Just
Okay.
just for something for the palate. And walnuts. I would have walnuts.
Right.
To try and get some minerals, different
Yeah, and
minerals in.
essential fats and stuff and
Yeah.
all of that. So to be clear, when you were juicing before, were you juice fasting basically for those?
Yes.
So for that
Yes.
whole, that's a whole. So there was no, you were not having any solids at all in that period between April and July. So April, that
No.
12-week period,
No.
it was
No.
just juicing.
No. 6 weeks. I did
6 weeks. Okay.
just juicing, and
Right.
then I started to have things like walnuts to try
Got it. Add a bit of
and
fiber
yeah,
and
bit
bulk
of
and a
fiber,
few more calories, but right.
but
Great.
still basically vegan. So I
Okay.
gave up alcohol, and Marcus, I gave up chocolate.
Yeah, now you see, Sharon knows how painful that would be for me. That would be like, no, no, sorry, no.
It
That's amazing. But you
it
kind of have
was,
to, right? Because
yeah,
you can't have the refined sugar, you can't have the excess
yeah.
fat. Because the thing about fat is, while we definitely need fats in the diet, and obviously juicing is not a long term, it's a long term strategy but you can't just live off juice long term, because you need the fiber, you need the fat, you need the slightly higher protein, you need the extra bits. But short term, it's a great way to help your immune system along, because your immune system is a giant circulating dustbin, as well as being, sort of, if it's having to deal with all this rubbish from the gut, then it compromises it a bit. And also, fat is transported through the lymph. So, which I know you know, but just for people watching, so that's why initially the rationale there was that you wanted to make everything as your system as unburdened as possible, while giving it as much help as possible to do its job, which it hadn't been able to do, culminating in this rather spectacular purge, which then preceded. And what's so interesting to me, Sharon, I'm sure you'll have thought of this as well, is the fact that you had that purge the day before an appointment with the oncologist, just as your chemo would start to begin. It's like your subconscious had been primed. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I've got this time, I need to be prepped by then. So it's like, right, we've got to get the rest of this out now. It's fascinating. It really is. And so okay, I'm talking too much. I need to ask you more questions. So this is two Aries. I'm much more Aries anyway, whatever. So the question that I wanted to ask then is, in terms of the astrology, was you used solar arc direction as a sort of timing indicator, in terms of I can see that by then my significator, which in astrology's folks just means that the planet that represents you in a particular chart, had moved off of this rather naughty fixed star and into a much stronger position. So I fully understand. But I know that you will have used lots of other techniques too. So could you unpack a few of those for
Well,
us?
the thing is, although I'm a nocturnal birth,
Like myself, all right? Yep, yep.
my moon is in the sixth, exalted. So
Right.
for other people, an exalted moon is in Taurus. And when it's in the sixth, it's below the horizon, and it should be above the horizon to be my high leg,
Okay.
or I'll
So
call it cocodon.
yeah, high leg traditionally means the planet that can give you hypothetically how many years you're going to live. To put it another way, it can represent your vitality. So yeah, sorry.
But my because of the position of my sun and the fact my sun is exalted and the connections with all the other planets, the sun comes out
More
as
strongly than the
more
moon.
strongly. Yeah.
Okay.
So knowing that the ruler of the sun was going into Aries by fair means or foul,
Yeah,
I was getting him there.
yeah, yeah.
I I I just knew that
Sure.
providing I lasted until December,
You would
I
not.
would make it.
I'm not questioning that rationale. I think that's to me, and I don't know if you agree with this. I think astrology is probably a bad term, but fractal in a sense. You can look at things multiple different levels through different lenses, if you like, and as long as you are using well put together tools for analyzing it, you're not mixing things from too many different toy boxes, and you're familiar with the box of toys that you are playing with, which is often a gripe of mine. So stop playing with the other toys before you've got used to these ones. But if you're using the tools properly, I think it's fine to look at to get that information from one from one chart or from one level, and to use that. And I think when I'm doing medical astrology, I certainly use astrology in that way to open up possibilities. And so when I'm looking at a chart, this doesn't mean being Pollyanna about it. This doesn't mean looking at a chart, for me anyway, and going and seeing an awful chart and just going, well, this is fine. It's more like looking at the chart and then going, so what can I use in this chart? What constructive thing, what could be a symbol, a type thing that can indicate some relief, and from which direction will that relief be coming? So, and I think that's how it's used. Which, I mean, we don't want to get into this whole digression about fate, but just, I mean, is that something along the lines of how you were thinking, Sharon, and how you think about astrology in general, or would you put it a
Yes,
bit differently?
being a traditional astrologer, as you know, the charge is often laid at our feet that we're fatalistic and it's really dire, traditional astrology. But actually, what it is, it shows the reality of the human condition, the ups and downs, the warts and the good times. And so when you know you're facing a time full of warts, you look to see how you can balance or mitigate that time. You can't avoid it. You know,
Yeah.
the one thing none of us can avoid is death. All you can do is stretch it out as long as possible before
Yes.
Grim Reaper comes knocking, and make it as much fun as possible. So
Yes.
you've got to look for what the planets symbolize. Now, whether it's symbolizing a good physician or good friends. I mean, good friends are so valuable in everyone's life because they're the props, because family is family, and but your friends are the ones you choose as your family. I mean, I had both. I had good friends, Jupiter
Good
in
family as
11th
well.
house, and good
Great.
family. Um, so I, because I had enough knowledge with my astrology, I could just look and
Yeah.
see, yeah, this is going to work. If I get through to December, I
Yeah.
know I will beat this.
Yeah.
Now, again, I have to say I was fortunate because this cancer was Herceptin receptive.
Yes.
And I think that is a big game changer, or
It
was a big
is,
game
it
changer.
is. But having said that, Sharon, the fact that you had got such remarkable results by the time you began the chemo, and I've seen this once or twice, once a couple of times in clients of mine who we started with herbs before they were due to start the chemo, because why would you not, you know?
Yes.
And it's just like, and others who by word of mouth, just by testimony from other
Yeah.
people who weren't my clients. But I've seen this a few times where by the time the treatment was started, they'd already got response. You know, things had already started to shift in a beneficial way. So like shrinkage of tumors or whatever. So it makes me wonder, I wonder how it would have gone if you'd have just gone fully herbal. But one doesn't know. I think my view on this, probably similar to yours, is if one just has to be rational about it. We know, at least with the treatment, the mainstream treatment, there is data. We know it has drawbacks. We know it's quite toxic and all the rest of it, but at least there is information about it. So, you know, it's a case of, do you go fully herbal and have no information, or do you do you go for the mainstream? And I think what you ended up doing is definitely the most rational course of action, where you said, I'll do both. You know, you go for the as much as you can do, and that was already paying dividends. And then you went for the mainstream as well, because, as you said, there were family who were very keen on you doing it. There was information about how it was likely to work, and this is a question actually. I would assume, but one should never assume really, but by the time you got to the chemo beginning point, and they obviously did those scans on you, did they upwardly revise their prognosis at that point?
No,
Officially?
no,
They didn't.
no,
That's interesting.
no, not at all. But I think for most people in the NHS, which is amazing, a godsend,
Oh yeah.
they're overwhelmed in the oncology department, and you are just a number, because they're seeing 50, 60 people a day.
Which is insane. I mean, that's probably how many clients I see in a month. I mean,
Yeah.
max, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
know?
But what happened? I was I used to do local radio. I still do. And somebody had died of cancer. So they had a whole day devoted to cancer, different types of cancer. And they asked me if they sent a car, because I was pretty poorly at that stage, would I come in, because obviously I'm used to studio,
Right.
and chat with chat about my cancer. So
Mm.
I went in, and they told me they'd got different specialists going in. And I'm sitting there in the chair, with my wig on and my scarves wrapped around
So
my.
you'd had the full-on hair loss and the
Oh,
pins and needles and the fatigue and feeling sick and all of it by that point, or
oh yes,
oh
oh
yeah,
yeah. I only cried twice. Once, the first time I cried was when they put the needle in with the chemo, because it went against my natural health principles.
yeah, you felt like you were sacrificing something
Yeah,
fundamental. Yeah.
I really felt I'd let myself and my beliefs down.
Well, no, not really, because you're still here. So
I
you
got
know,
yeah, so I got over it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and for people who don't know, I used to have very, very thick, long hair that I could sit on, and that was my identity. If I was meeting a stranger, I'd say, "Well, look for someone with long hair, exceptionally long hair."
Right.
So I had it cut, and again, for people who are going to lose their hair, do not shave your head. Let the hair fall out naturally. Have it cut short, but let it fall out naturally. If you shave your head, the little bits go like nails, and they scratch, and they're really, really hard to get rid of.
Okay.
So, and especially if you're going to wear a wig, let your hair fall out naturally. I mean, cut it, but don't shave it.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Okay.
And my hair was coming out in clumps, and I made the decision one morning. I thought, right, this is it. I've just got to get the hair off my head because I had bits.
Yeah.
And a friend came to the door, and she said, "How are you?" And of course, the last thing you want is someone. What do you say? Because that's a natural reaction. How are you feeling today? Oh yes, yeah, great. I'm just going to get rid of the last of my hair. How do you think I'm feeling?
Yeah.
And so I cried, but that was only because a friend.
Sympathy is the killer, isn't it? Sometimes it's just
yeah. And then I thought, hey, I've had this hair for 55 years. It's about time I had a change.
I was actually going to say that in a sense. It's like you'd done the big old physical purge, and here you were, going through the fire. The phoenix has to do it has to be burnt to ashes first. There's no way of getting around that, is there? Really? No. If you're going to do a phoenix job, then
you don't do half a job, do you? No point. Absolutely no point. So so that I lost my fingernails, and I lost my hair and my toenails, and I got the neuropathy. But you see, I was still able to go out and socialize. I did not get sick once from July until October when I finished the chemo. I was not sick.
That was going to be my next question. So that's really interesting. What do you put that down to? Were you still juicing with the ginger?
Yeah, I was a lot. Oh, I forgot turmeric. I mean, key.
Okay.
And I was very fortunate. I am very fortunate because living in the southeast, we've got a lot of Asian supermarkets where you can get fresh turmeric root. The yellow turmeric root.
Reducing with that and the ginger.
Yeah. So I was buying big bulbs of ginger and loads of live turmeric root, as it were. So I wasn't using turmeric powder, which is a good substitute if you can't get turmeric. But you must always take turmeric with a heating agent, with pepper, with chilli.
Something to help the curcumin absorb.
Yes.
Essentially, from a pharmacological thing there, what you've got is something that's very powerfully anti-inflammatory, both the ginger and the turmeric. The ginger is somewhat anti-cancer, circulatory. The turmeric more strongly anti-cancer and hepatic. And from an astrological point of view, you've got Sun, Mars. So Sun in Aries, Mars in Aries. Yeah. So bang. Fantastic. Yes. Lovely. Bang. Exactly. Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, so that makes a lot of sense. My one question for you there was, did you have any issues with the oncology folks having issues with you using the herbs? Did you just do the sort of, I'm not just going to tell them? Or...
No. So what I was coming to with the radio was, there I am sitting in the studio all wrapped up, and in walks my oncologist. Now, he looked at me, and you could see it going through his head. You look familiar. Are you one of my patients? So then I stood up and said, "Hello, David. I'm one of your patients."
Yeah.
And then the studio exec said, "Would we do an hour session together, talking about his role as a consultant and my role as a patient?" And so we had a chat beforehand, and I told him, A, I'm an astrologer, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. B, I'm a herbalist, and I am using natural herbs, which I had told him at the outset when I started my treatment. Because I was very keen on cod liver oil. I just glug it out the bottle. But he said, don't take cod liver oil because it can present a barrier to the chemo getting through.
Okay.
So I stopped cod liver oil.
It's interesting what they pick up on. I mean, because I've had instances in the past where I've written to hospitals and the one thing they've picked out of a prescription seems so arbitrary. It's like, why are you picking on that? And sometimes there's a good rationale, there's a reason for it. It's like, oh, I can totally see why they said, well, there's one prescription years ago I remember with all sorts. There was celandine in there. There was loads of. The one thing they picked out was chamomile because, according to the hospital computer, it could cause anemia by retarding iron absorption. I was like, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's like that's so hypothetical and it's so irrelevant. But anyway, so I think it really depends, because I'm always very interested in this sort of the communication between, us complementary folks and the mainstream, if people are using a mainstream treatment, particularly something like chemo, because very often you get this just say no reflex from them that can be problematic. So it's really nice that your oncologist was like, okay, fine, just use it, just don't use the cod liver oil. So did you list all the other herbs for him?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't list all the other herbs because I couldn't remember them. and also he's a oncologist. He's not going to know. He's not going to know the herbs.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. So it's pointless taking up his time with saying, "Oh, I'm milk thistle, I'm bloodroot, I'm this and that," because he's just going to go,
What? Yeah. No. So that's a really good, because what I've done what I tend to do now is I'll write a letter for patients to take to the hospital pharmacist, not for their oncologist, because the oncologist doesn't know. And if they don't know, they'll often just say no, and then they'll be saying no for no good reason. They'll just be saying no reflexively. So I'll say and that seems to work better, because the hospital pharmacist can then go through everything on the computer and it'll spit out if there's. I mean, I've checked it myself anyway. As I'm sure, if you went to a herbalist, he'd have checked the herbs anyway to make sure they're okay with the chemo. But it's, two brains are better than one, and then everyone's informed and whatnot. So, but that's the other way to do it. Just say to the oncologist that I am going to be using them, and then they can say to you, just don't use this and that. But it's worth bringing that up, because I'm always interested to hear how people negotiate that, because that's always tricky. It's always that, balancing the two.
Well, I think the fact that the first meeting with this particular oncologist, they gave me a book about dying, and in it I sat there and flicked through it, and it says, eat donuts, eat fried food, and I went ballistic. And
what a surprise.
And I told them exactly what I thought, and my sister sat there and said, Sharon, you can't say things like that. And I said, yes, I can. I've just said it. You are killing people with this book. You're not helping people. So I don't think he would have argued too much with me about using herbs.
Right at that point, yes. having established the baseline, yes, yeah. I mean, I think from my point of view, it's or from your point of view as a practitioner as well. If you do advise on herbs, as you may do occasionally, I assume you do.
I do suggest.
Yeah, it's always kind of, how do you want to be a good human and collaborate and not piss on anyone else's chips is the phrase I usually use, but mess anyone else's, step on other people's toes is a nice way of putting it. But at the same time, you are sometimes dealing with a system where there is essentially prejudice, where there is essentially, just without any knowledge of what you're going to do, just if they know you're a herbalist, and particularly if they know you're an astrologer, they're just going to say, so it's just fielding that. So that's the workaround I've come to is okay, write to the pharmacists rather than the oncologists. But I don't know, I think going in as you do with it, I think it's most important that the patient, in this case you, has a really strong idea of how you want your treatment to go.
Yes, and you see, Marcus, I think fortunate I had a good education. Fortunate I was brought up to speak my mind politely but firmly, and I'm not afraid of authority. You know, a lot of people, when they sit in front of a doctor or a specialist in any field, they feel that they've got no knowledge, they've got no self-possession, and
Right.
so they won't question what they're told. Whereas if somebody says to me, you've got to take this, you've got to take that, I'll research it, I'll research the alternatives.
Yeah.
And then I will go back and say, well, why have you suggested this dose? Because the other thing with chemo, of course, is the doses aren't generally tailored.
No, they're maximum tolerated. Yes. So what happened with yours, Sharon? Because for anyone watching, this is the standard thing for chemo is the MTD, the maximum tolerated dosage. In other words, any higher and you die. And it's a usually one size fits all sort of dosing regime, which is really scandalous. I'm sure you know about this, that it's been shown that lower and more frequent dosing may even be more effective, and that there are these tests, the chemo sensitivity tests, which you can apply for privately, but you can't get on the NHS. They've been available for, yes, these have been available for 10 years now. They're still considered not fully proven, but there's a good deal of science on them. And you can have a bit of your biopsy sent away. There are various labs in America and in the UK and in Europe that will do this. And they squirt the different chemo drugs onto your cancer cells and see which ones are most effective. And they will also do that with natural compounds like curcumin and ECGC from green tea and stuff like that. So chemo sensitivity testing, it's called. And you can get it privately. It's still very expensive. It's like £2,000 or something but I would say it's worth having it done. because then you can know beforehand, because a few unfortunates have chemo and it is a bit of a lottery because they'll give everyone the standard, and a percentage of those people may not respond very well, and there might be something else that they respond better to. But anyway, so in your case, they were going to give you the maximum tolerated dose. What actually, did you negotiate that, or did you have discussions?
No, I didn't have discussions about that. I don't know what dose I had, but it was a bag, and it was an infusion that took several hours.
The big old whacking dose of it.
Yeah, and then towards the end, I think they started the Herceptin infusion alongside the chemo in August.
Right.
So I finished the chemo the first week of October, and then the Herceptin, initially I had a nurse come to the house,
right,
I think every fortnight, or may have been every week, for my Herceptin infusion, and then they trusted me enough to inject myself
right,
with the drugs. So I was on Herceptin for a year.
Okay, wow. So that was 1 year, and that was all by injection, the Herceptin.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And again, this was the beauty of having this thing called the port-a-cath in my chest.
You didn't have to go in for the.
No, the nurse could just attach the infusion, infuse it, and go away. So you're a lot safer from bacteria.
Right.
And I say there's no pain. Now, unfortunately, my sister didn't push for a port-a-cath, and her veins all collapsed. And seeing her on the maximum dose, and she was 5'5", and I think at the end weighed 7 stone, and she was having maximum chemo. And then in the end, they said, "Oh no, we think we'll put you on chemo every other day," and immediately she blossomed.
Okay.
So it's worthwhile, everybody who goes in, if you feel rubbish, yes, the chemo will make you feel rubbish, but if you feel really rubbish, say to them, it's too much, please lower the dose.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Sharon. I mean, when you started the chemo, how soon after starting it did you start noticing really grotty side effects?
The second treatment.
So 2 weeks in. Oh, you mean after
Yeah,
about a
4 weeks
month?
in.
Yeah,
Yes,
got it,
four
got it.
weeks
I was
in.
going to say it's usually after somewhere between the second and the third treatment, because after the
Yeah.
first treatment, people are, oh, I feel fine. It's like, yeah, it takes a while. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that was funny because they give you steroids for 3 days after your.
were you woo like up on the steroids?
The first time I had chemo, I had a friend come to stay with me in case I was ill or anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, 4:30, I was up. I had cut the hedges. I had nearly an acre of garden. I had cut the hedges before she'd woken up.
Yeah, high doses of steroids can actually make really high doses can make people a little bit psychotic because they really, you're on fire. So amazing. So right. So what I'm the chemo was ongoing. So by October, when you stopped, were you completely clear? Was that and did that fit with because your initial astrological prognosis or template, let's say, was okay, if I can get through to November, I should be cooked. I should be okay. Did that fit in with that timing scheme?
I saw the oncologist in December prior to starting the radiotherapy. And he said, well, I don't know what's happened here. You're a miracle. And I said, I know what's happened. It's my astrology and my herbalism. And a little bit of help from you.
Yeah, brilliant.
But that was, yeah, so that was it. They could not believe from what I had exhibited and what they had on the scans
Yeah.
that I was so healthy. You see, I was so healthy.
It's phenomenal. I mean, what I would just going back to the astrology because that perfectly fit with your initial template, and I love it from that point of view of like, well, both from my traditional side, my Neoplatonic side, which is the idea that things exist in this thought form before they exist in physical form. So if you have a framework, you can draw things into that framework you know what I mean, as long as it's you have a map and you can so it's by setting that in your mind and then crucially doing something about it. You can't just set it, you have to set it in your mind and then do things. You did both, it achieved that result. But did you do any other, because going back to an earlier question about doing any other, did you do any horary or anything else about it? And if not, why not? Why was it just your intuition as an astrologer that is the bit of information that's telling me what I need to know? Because I don't know, it's sometimes like a lowest common denominator thing. You can overcomplicate and overcook the thing. If you have the thing that's telling you that, you don't need to then add an annex and an extension and whatever to it. Anyway, what
I live with fear every day of my life that it's going to come back.
Okay.
So I did not want to look at any horary or anything in case I saw something slightly negative. And if I wasn't in the right frame of mind and I latched onto the negativity,
yes,
you can't get it out easily.
I think that's amazingly sensible and very brave of you, actually, as an astrologer, not to do that, because I couldn't help myself. I think I would look at the horary and then I would do exactly what you've just said. You'd start noticing the problems and going, oh God. Yes.
Yeah. But the other thing I did was visualization. And this is, you'll get this because you're Aries. One of my favourite authors was the late Sir Terry Pratchett.
Yes, brilliant.
And he wrote a book called The Wee Free Men, which is about the McFeagles. And they're little tiny men covered in blue tattoos with flaming red hair. And they love nothing better than to fight. So I would lay in bed and I would envisage the McFeagles with dogs with iron snouts. You'll get all this. And they had iron swords.
Right. This is all Mars, by the way, folks. Mars.
And they were going through my bloodstream, fighting all the cancer cells and stabbing the cancer cells with their swords of iron. And the dogs were chasing down any stray cancer cells and eating the cancer cells with their muzzles of iron.
Amazing.
I mean, the dogs didn't feature in the McFeagles,
No,
in
no, no, no.
The We Free Men. That's the
Yes.
book.
Yeah.
That's what you need to visualize. These lovely fighting men tumbling through your body.
What's fascinating is that visualization is obviously based on the astrological symbolism. You've got the Mars, and even Mars in Pisces, which it was at the time, which is the little blue men and these little gnomes or something, which is a very sort of Pisces imaginary realm kind of stuff. So it's fabulous, really, really good. Okay, so yeah, that answered my question about the horary and the astrology and that visual. Like, you've given some really, really, really great information in this, Sharon. Thank you. So the practical information, I think the two things that really came up was one about having the port-a-cath in terms of
Yes,
practical, if you're
yes.
going for the orthodox chemo treatment. The other thing that you said that I didn't write down, that I'll put it on the screen when I go back, because there's another thing that you said that was very practical.
Keeping
And
a
then
diary.
keeping a diary, that was one of them. And I'll do a little list at the end of summary points that you said, because there was some really good things that you brought up. And then the last thing, this visualization technique. And in terms of the astrology, if you have a chart that you're using, what we're doing is finding your significator in the chart, which is usually the ruler of the ascendant, or in Sharon's case, she was using the ruler of her moon, the sun,
Sun.
rather, sorry, sun, which is the high leg in the chart, or one of the strongest points representing vitality, and using that as an indicator of vitality, which is interesting. Just to go back to the horary question, I don't know if I had a question to ask or a thought about that. I think yes, this is it. This is the way I think of it, and I wanted to see if we were in agreement or if you had a different view on it. Because when I've used astrology in these circumstances, not touch wood yet for myself. I've nearly died twice, but that was when I was young. I'm hoping not to revisit that for a while, so we'll see.
Yeah, stick clear.
Yeah, we'll see. But the idea I always have with doing horary is that I've done this for a friend and for a client as well who'd had a cancer diagnosis, and I did the horary or consultation chart in this case. And I kind of regard timing in astrology as potentially fractal. So you know how sometimes you do in horary where it's like, if it's not 12 weeks, it'll be 12 months. So I always say this could be 12 months or 12 years or even longer. So the idea is make that think of it as an elasticated window where if you miss that, you kind of can. So if you've got some like, okay, this might, in the particular situation, you might have a chart that says, okay, this will get resolved completely and then you're done. You might have a chart that says this resolved and then this might come back. If it says it might come back, it'll give a sort of timing a framework. But I think there's always more than one potential framework for these things. I don't think I think the Stoics were wrong, is what I'm saying, or at least maybe they weren't wrong, but certainly their idea of astrology as being, this sort of exact. I think that was incorrect. I think the Neoplatonists were more right, where you have this idea things can materialize in different ways, but astrology is a framework. So if it doesn't happen then, and I think our agency can be, well, if by your action you can expand it to the next one up. So, I mean, in my own birth chart, that you've got indications that I could die at 15. If you read, from the medieval astrology, I'm a third differentia baby. I think I've said this before, which means I should have died in infancy. And if I was born in medieval times, I would have done, because there wouldn't have been the surgery and whatever. And then from my chart, you could see I could also die at the age of 15, which I nearly did, but didn't. And then the next one up is, well, we'll see for about 7 years' time. But you've got kind of steps. So your aim should always be to push that as far as possible. So I don't know. That's just. What do you think of that? Am I grossly abusing astrological prediction through thinking in that way, or?
No. Yeah, I think that's very sensible. As long as you can balance optimism with reality.
Yeah, which is always the tricky thing.
That's the tricky. That is the tricky thing, isn't it? you see, 7 years' time, Saturn square from now, that there may be accidents, or you may neglect your own health through looking after others. So you've already got a framework where you think, right, in 7 years' time, I have got to make sure that I either go off to a desert island with a pile of books and lay in the sun and swim in turquoise sea, providing there's no COVID.
Probably get eaten by a shark or something if I did that,
Well, yeah, there is that. Does your chart say he's going to die at the hands of wild animals?
No, it's not one of those, fortunately. And I think my timing was off. I think the one is in it's sooner than that, actually. There's a moon square Saturn primary direction at around the age of 46, 47. And so I haven't tightened that up by looking at it yet, because my general premise is always look at it out the corner of your eye, and then wait until the bus is starting to come over the hill, and then once you've got a bit of context, then I'll do a bit more work and start working out strategy or what I can do.
Yeah, that's sensible. That's sensible.
Right. Good, because otherwise you're writing your whole future with no context, which seems to be a recipe for disaster.
Yes. I mean, the astrologers of yore, they've only left the records that they choose to leave.
Yeah.
Where they say, I'm thinking of Valens, where he would say, and so it proved, this person died a pauper, this person died abroad.
Yes.
But life is in your hands. It's what you make it. We have genetic programs that we cannot avoid. We cannot avoid our parents. When we're up there, we look down and we choose them. I chose my parents well. And if you didn't choose your parents well, deal with it, get on with it, but make your life good.
Yeah, it's all comes down to I have a lot of time for some of the. I don't have a lot of time for some sort of new agey stuff, and I have a lot of time for others. And I think the really positive thing that comes out of a lot of that new age stuff is the new thought stuff, in a sense, the idea that. And this isn't a new idea. This actually dovetails very well with a lot of old religious and metaphysical thinking in general, that how you choose to look at things will affect the outcome. And it's your choice. It's always your choice. So if you're given a really difficult hand, if you're dealt a bad hand, you can make a bad situation worse or better. And that's your choice, It's you've got the hand. It's like that's yours now. So it's like I always think if you might have a chart which says I've inherited a huge palace and an orchard, or I've inherited a sort of a garret and a window box. But you could make that garret and the window box the most beautiful, artistic, wonderful, so like you become like you're photographed and it appears in the local paper, and then everyone's talking about this amazing little flat, and or you could inherit the family mansion and run it into the ground, so yes. Anyway, we could probably talk about this. Thank you, Sharon. I've taken us well over time, so
that's all right.
It's been really, really, really fascinating. Thank you.
Good.
So much for doing this. Was there anything before I end this? I just wanted to say, for you as an astrologer, where can people find you and look up your works?
Thank you, Marcus. It's astrologersharon.co.uk is my website. On Facebook, it's Astrologer Sharon, but you have to have at least 5 friends that I approve of.
Good policy.
And email is astrologersharon@aol.com. So it's pretty easy. There's that's it really. Just look and you'll find me if I'm right for you.
Amazing.
But one thing I will say, Marcus, if anyone has any questions about juicing and about mental attitude whilst they're undergoing chemo for whatever cancer, male or female, please, if you do get in contact with me on email at astrologersharon@aol.com, please mark your subject Cancer Conversation with Marcus.
Okay, thank you for that, Sharon. So that you're forewarned before opening the messages in your inbox. Yes,
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you so much for doing this today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I will send you a copy of this once I've done it.
My
All
pleasure.
right, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.